I prefer the real Spike. I said the real Spike. Perfection.
Before we get into the video, can we just take a second to appreciate this amazing pixel art that somebody by the name Strange PK on Twitter did for me? I mean, this made my day. Just random fan art. I never, ever would have thought somebody would have done fan art of me, and I just really appreciate it. I thought it was really fucking cool. If you like pixel art, and if you like guns, because he does some pretty sweet pixel art of guns, go check him out on Twitter. Again, that is @StrangePK. Hello there, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to another episode of Mando Minute? Mando Monologue? I don't really know what to call this yet, but that's okay. We'll figure it out. If you haven't seen the first episode in this series, I'll go ahead and leave an annotation up here. You can go ahead and click on that and watch that when this video gets done. This is more informal, it's not scripted, more just like a conversation. Granted, it's a conversation with myself, which is kind of crazy, but it's crazy time, so you gotta adapt. So what I'm here to talk to you about today is Cowboy Bebop and Netflix. So before we really get into it, I kind of want to just talk about Netflix and their Netflix original shows. So there's some really good ones out there. I really enjoy Altered Carbon. I mentioned that in my Cyberpunk 2077 video, where if you haven't seen that, I'll go ahead and link that somewhere, probably an annotation. Altered Carbon, really cool, especially if you like Cyberpunk, if you like futuristic detective shows, I would highly recommend it. Castlevania, another one of my favorites. I was really surprised how much I enjoyed it. If you like Castlevania the game, you have to watch this anime. And even if you're a fan of anime in general, it has really solid action, it has great writing, the characters are amazing, and they just interact so well with each other. It's a very entertaining show. Castlevania is another one that I cannot recommend enough. But for the good things that Netflix has, it also has some pretty awful Netflix originals. Like, you had Cloverfield Paradox, which that was its own movie. It had a completely different name. It had nothing to do with Cloverfield. And then J.J. Abrams stepped in, J.J. Abrams and Bad Robot, and they said, you know what we're going to do? We're just going to go ahead and shoehorn this into the Cloverfield universe because it adds so much to the Cloverfield lore. They just slapped the Cloverfield name on there, threw the monster in at the end, and said, well, there you go. People will eat that shit up, right? Then you have The Open House, which is just the sorriest excuse for a horror movie that I've ever seen. I mean, the movie is incredibly boring. I like slow burn horror. A couple of my favorite horror movies of all time, It Follows, Hereditary, and The Witch. Not something that I would say is fast-paced, heart-pounding tension and terror all the way through, but they're enjoyable. Open House just misses the mark completely in every aspect. It's kind of torture to put yourself through watching it. I mean, if you're really into that, maybe if you're into that BDSM, you want to get some punishment on yourself, then go ahead and watch Open House. Speaking of BDSM, if you're really a masochist, you'll love The Silence. The Silence is this movie where they find these underground bat-like creatures. Kind of reminds me of the Krill from Gears of War, these swarming creatures that will just rip you apart in seconds. But anyway, they find these krill-like creatures in this cave, and they accidentally let them out, and then they terrorize the world, and you can tell the movie was really going for a quiet place. Like, that's really what they were pushing for, but it just doesn't get there at all. Like, in the movie, the daughter is deaf, so you think sign language is going to play a big part in the movie, and for most of the movie, they're talking to one another, and she can just read lips, so they just took the lazy way out with that one. Who needs to deal with sign language? And then you get into the live-action anime category, which is kind of what we're here to talk about today, with Death Note, which is it's just an abortion. It's an abomination, and you should not subject yourself to something so damaging to your brain. It should really come with a warning from the Surgeon General like you find on alcohol or cigarettes. Warning, watching Netflix's Death Note will make you mentally retarded. Do not watch this. Guaranteed to drop your IQ to 17. They just butcher the characters and the story, and nothing makes sense in the whole goddamn movie. It's just a train wreck. Like, look what they did to Light. If you don't know who Light is, he's the main character of the story. He's a cold-blooded killer, granted killing terrible people, but he has this god complex. So imagine this cool, calm, collected, ruthless individual. Now look at this clip really quick, and you tell me if that's what you get from this character.
No reason to act surprised. I am the Shinigami Ryuk. That used to be my notebook. Judging by your laughter, you've already figured out that what you have is no ordinary notebook.
Shinigami. A god of death, huh? Well, I'm not surprised. In fact, Ryuk, I've been waiting for you.
Oh?
Okay, you know what? After watching that clip again, I was wrong. 10 out of 10. This is the best live-action adaptation of any story ever. Thank you so much, Netflix. But seriously, this is what has me nervous for any live-action anime adaptation. I find it difficult to adapt anime properly to live action because it exists, for the most part, so far outside of the realm of reality that it's difficult to bring that to life while maintaining the same essence. And I'm not saying it's impossible, I'm just saying it's difficult. And don't get me wrong, there are some really good ones out there. I mean, hell, the Japanese Death Note live action is excellent. It doesn't make sense that the Netflix version could have gotten it so wrong. Then you have, Alita Battle Angel, which is incredible. If you haven't seen it, you have to watch it. I really love it. And this is what I'm hoping the Cowboy Bebop live-action Netflix series will be following. Not in the shoes of the Netflix original Death Note, but in the Alita Battle Angel category. Give me something good. For those of you who don't know, I am a huge Cowboy Bebop fan. It is my favorite anime of all time. It's one of my favorite shows of all time. I just love the setting, the universe, the characters. They're all so interesting and relatable. Like, you have Spike, he's kind of very aloof, very indifferent of things going on around him. He seems like he doesn't care about things, even though he really does have a good heart. He has a really hard time of letting go of his past. He's a very pained individual, and you see him kind of expel that pain through a lot of sarcasm. Then you have Jet, who I always saw as kind of like the dad of the Bebop crew. The guy will fuck you up if you piss him off, but you can really tell that he cares about everybody on the ship. And of course you have Edward, who probably sexually confused many young boys. And Ein, which, Space Corgi, what more do I have to say? And this isn't even mentioning all of the excellent villains and other side characters that we meet throughout the series, but who we're here to talk about today is Faye Valentine. While all of the crew of the Bebop are very complex and they have a lot of layers, and I know I'm being very simple with this because this is not an in-depth analysis of the show, which I'm probably going to end up doing because I just fucking love Cowboy Bebop, but Faye is somebody who is very reluctant to trust others. She doesn't like to stick around in any one place for too long. She doesn't like getting attached, but she draws a lot of attention to herself on purpose with the way that she acts and the ways that she dresses. She's very flirtatious, and she uses her very good looks in order to further her own goals. Like, she'll flirt with men to either steal from them or maybe distract them, help her get through certain areas. Like, she uses her femininity and her beauty to her advantage, and this has become a point of contention for the new live-action adaptation of Cowboy Bebop. So we're going to be taking a look at this article from Bounding Into Comics. I'll leave a link to this article down in the description below. Be sure to check them out. Really good website. But the article reads, Netflix Cowboy Bebop series will not be a one-to-one adaptation. Faye Valentine's costume to be censored. Then there's a quote, we need to have a real human being wearing that. So I have a lot of mixed feelings when it comes to the quotes that are used in this article. It has nothing to do with how the article's written. It's just, I see these really good points being brought up by, I believe his name is Grillo or Grio, sorry if I'm mispronouncing that. He's the writer for the series. So there's a quote that says, "We ain't playing Bebop, Bebop is playing us. You can't look at Cowboy Bebop and say, well, it's just a taking off point. We're gonna give them different hair or different clothing and we're gonna call it something different. And just, it's sort of gonna be a loose thing. If you're doing Cowboy Bebop, you're doing Cowboy Bebop." And I think that's an excellent take. When you're adapting something, especially something as iconic as Cowboy Bebop, you don't really want to stray too far away from things. And I understand that you want to make something your own. You want to have your own take on it. So I'm not too concerned with it not being a one-for-one remake of the anime, because after all, seeing something new would be cool, but you want to make sure that it is still Cowboy Bebop, because this show certainly has a very distinct style and feel to it. Where I start to get worried is when Grio starts saying that the mature elements of the series are going to be toned down, which this is a very mature show and it deals with some pretty heavy shit, so to hear that they're going to try to tone that down is very concerning, because we know what happens when somebody feels like they need to change something to appeal to Western audiences. It doesn't work out. Death Note, for example. So there's another quote from Grio where he says, "We need to have a real human being wearing that," obviously referencing Faye's costume. He goes on to also say, "And while characters still smoke, the habit may be a bit less glamorized to reflect modern sensibilities." And I have a big problem with this for a couple of reasons. One, are you saying that people who cosplay as Faye aren't human beings? Obviously, I'm being a little hyperbolic here. I don't really think that that's what he was going for, but it's just a very odd explanation for changing her costume. You could just say you don't want to hypersexualize Faye, which doesn't make sense. It is equally as absurd to say you're not trying to hypersexualize a hypersexual character. Her costume design, it reflects her personality perfectly. She dresses that way for a reason. It brings attention to her and it allows her to get what she wants. She is a very sexual character. And as for the smoking thing, I don't think it's the end of the world, but it's just like a little nitpick thing. Are you worried that you're going to piss off some parents because their child is watching attractive, cool people doing cool things smoke? Like, why are your kids watching that in the first place? Why aren't you making sure they're not watching that content? Like, do you think any sensible adult is going to get upset that characters are smoking on screen? Like, I would understand if this was aimed at kids, but it's Cowboy Bebop. It is not aimed at kids. All of this just makes me very worried for where this series might be headed, and I hope I'm wrong. I hope that it's amazing, because I don't want something that's got the Cowboy Bebop name to suck. I would love nothing more than to get those same feelings that I had when I was younger watching Cowboy Bebop on Adult Swim at like 12 o'clock or 1 o'clock in the morning. If they could recapture that and bring that back today for an even wider audience, I would love that. But seeing how they didn't even consult with the original director of the series, I don't have a lot of faith. But again, I hope I'm wrong. I really do. And that about does it. That's what I wanted to talk about today. Like I said, I'll probably revisit this topic because I would love to do a full video on Cowboy Bebop. And if that's something that you want to see, let me know down in the comments below. Are you worried about this live action adaptation? Do you think Netflix is going to do their thing and fuck it up like they did with Death Note? Or do you think it's going to be good? Feel free to share any of your favorite Cowboy Bebop moments down in the comments below. I'd actually like to see that a lot too. If you like the video, go ahead and drop a like, and if you really want to support the channel, hit that subscribe button. Don't forget to follow me on Twitter at Metal Gear Mando, and until next time, I will see you in the next video.